which is a course on DSLR cameras. So it teaches you like workflow in regards to DSLR cameras. And I have a coupon code for all of the workshop attendees, which is in chat. So if you care about that, you can go and check it out. And there's a coupon code for those. So for those of you, so you can get a little bit of money off at the checkout. Okay, let's start today. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about color. Let's just pop right into an image right here, and we're going to start talking about it. So in ACDC, I guess there's a bunch of different areas where we can talk about color. In this case, we're going to be talking about color balance, and then we're going to be talking about a bunch of different adjustment layers. So if you're new to ACDC in edit mode, which is what we're going to be talking about primarily here, although we'll talk a little bit about develop mode as well, there is functionally a bunch of different ways that you can edit an image. Some is through filters. Filters can be non-destructive, can be destructive. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to be talking about color balance. And then we have all of these adjustment layers, which exist underneath the layers panel, and adjustment layers are all non-destructive edits. So when you go to save your file, if you save your file as an ACDC file, those functions are editable in the future. Okay, so in this image, we have this woman with this bright red dress in this case. And if you were to change this color, right, if you were to use something like a vibrancy adjustment and change this, what you'll notice is that because there's other hues in this image, you're going to start to see that affect the background. In this case, this image has a very obviously lots of reds in this image. So when we go to adjust something as simple as the hue slider, we get a universal change to this image. And obviously this isn't not what we want. This is an unintended change. So we can utilize a bunch of different tools to make better selections of this. Some of you might be familiar with the tool like in this case, the magic wand tool, which is just on the top toolbar here. And if we were to make a selection of, in this case, the red, the dress, if I was to do that like this, okay, with my threshold even set fairly low, if I'm to make a change of this dress, you'll know that this still isn't really a perfect change. So I have selected my magic wand tool, I've selected the red, and then if I wanted to go to that same vibrance adjustment, okay, click on it there. With my selection, I can change this, but as you can see, as I decrease or increase these values, as I change this hue, there's whole parts of this image right here, this darker red, that are not captured in the process, and this looks very jagged and quite jarring. We also have captured a bit of the hand in so doing, so this isn't a very good method of changing the color in something like this. So what we can talk about, and what is a really useful tool, is I'm going to jump into color balance, and we're going to start talking about a couple different tools. So I've taken my image into color balance. This is on the left-hand filter panel here, and we're brought into a filter. So a filter, again, being a destructive change that we can make a series of adjustments to this image. Some of you might notice too that in terms of selections, a red dress is not that complicated. To make a accurate selection and change, or adjust, in this case, add or change the color. But we'll talk about more complex adjustments momentarily. So once again, if I was to, in this filter, just simply change the hue, in this case, you'll notice that the same effect occurs, that my background is now, that same, in this case, it changes it more to that blue shade or this green shade, whatever. Speaking of which, if you ever have changed a slider and you want to return it to its default values in ACDC, what you can do is you can actually right-click on the slider and it sets it to 0 automatically. So if I want to make a selection of just red, okay, what I can do is I can click on pixel targeting. And to this day, this is still one of my absolute favorite tools in the software. It's super simple to use. It's really, really, really useful. So pixel targeting asks you a couple questions. So all of these effects, okay, in pixel targeting, this might seem a little bit complicated in terms of the UI, but there's 3 parts of this. and we'll talk about them. This box right here with the presets, the vibrance, the saturation, hue, lightness, red, green, blue, and then the before and after sliders, these are the general adjustments of this tool. So what I mean by that is that these are the actual values that are going to impact what you see here, that are going to change the effects of this image. Now, on the right-hand side, we have pixel targeting. Pixel targeting allows us to suggest areas that we want to change and to ignore parts of our image that we don't want to change. And it's bracketed into these two different sections, which is tones and colors. So we talked earlier about, okay, well, we want to change this person's dress. Well, very simply, if we wanted to do that, we're going to tell pixel targeting that we want to target, in essence, all of the range of tones. Remember earlier when we used our magic wand and then it sort of ignored these darker sections here? That part of the problem is because these are still red, but they're variationally, they're shadows and blacks. They're like, they're darker tones. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're targeting all the tones, but we're specifically only targeting the hue that is red. So the way we're going to do this is we're actually going to set all of the targeted colors to 0. And we will increase the red targeted tone. And so what happens here is you get a preview, okay, on our image. It's basically this little mask here that says to us with white the areas that are going to be impacted, and black with black, in this case, the areas that are going to be ignored. Now, if we remove or rather reduce some of these tones, we're going to start to see our image change. Let's consider blacks first, okay? So in our image, with the color selected of red, where the blacks exist? Well, they exist right in this section right here near her collar, underneath her chest here, and parts of the area that are sort of close to her leg, and in the sort of base areas where we start to see more and more of these shadows appear. So if we reduce this tones to 0, there's not much change in terms of the targeted mask, and that's because there's probably very true blacks in this image under the qualification of them being dark and red. But if we reduce the shadows, I bet we're going to start to see, yeah, pretty significant changes occur to this mask. That being that a lot of the reds in this image, especially on right hand, where you start, the light in this case is coming from this direction, right? It's coming from the right to the left. So a lot of the shadows are appearing on the left here. So if we're to say, okay, let's change the hue, but in this case, we have our shadows set really low, where you'll see that it only impacts it for the midtones, the highlights, and the whites. Versus an interaction in this case, which would also include the shadows, in which case a lot of this is changed. And it's actually much more dramatic, you know, if we're looking at this section of our image. Now, this is great. Okay, so we can take something like this whole image with her dress being red, and we can adjust that using something like pixel targeting quite easily. But like I said earlier, this is a fairly simple example. You know, this is a quite a simple example. What happens do we get into areas where there's a bit more complexity in terms of the colors that exist in our image? So let's have a look at that now with a different image, and we'll talk about that. Okay, let me just clear some of these. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at this image too, because this image is way more complicated. So we have a ton of variations of pink, okay? So areas of our image that are pink and red and gold, and then we also have parts of our image that have these this bright blue in here. And so if we're going to adjust the color, if we're going to add and change color in this image, what we need to do is we need to be a bit more refined with our selection. So let's do that same change. Let's change this dress, but let's be very careful as to not change the background color, which in this case is this sort of salmon-y pink color. Phil, I have to go, so this is very useful. Yes, it will be available for viewing on our YouTube page. So just subscribe, follow to our YouTube page, and you'll get a notification when that changes. Otherwise, if you don't don't want or need to subscribe, just follow the link, and it'll be up in a couple days. So let's take our subject here. I'm going to go into color balance, and let's talk about a much more complicated selection process. We're still going to use pixel targeting. We're still going to use this hue change. But we're also going to make a manual change, okay? Actually, maybe before we do that, let's talk about manual selections. So there's a couple ways to make automatic selections. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about them later today. One of the things we've already talked about is the pixel targeting tool. But just to briefly cover, if you want to take a part of your image and you want to change it in some way, you're going to need to make a selection. And in AC/DC, the selection tools are located up at the top left-hand corner with the brush selection tool, the polygonal selection tool, the rectangular selection tool, elliptical, lasso, and then the magic wand, which we explained earlier. Now these are all manual, meaning that you have to interact with them. You need to suggest to these tools where actually you want to change this image. Versus something like an automatic tool like pixel targeting, which just says, hey, blues, let's target those, or hey, reds, or hey, tonally blacks in this image, let's target those. So if we're going to make a selection here of this dress, we need to combine automatic functions with manual functions. So let's do that. Sorry, I'm going to go back into color balance. Stefan asked, what is the link to the YouTube site? I put it in the chat section, and I'll put it in there again. So you can see it just under chat there. Okay, so let's do a pixel targeting selection. So once again, I'm going to open up pixel targeting within this color balance tool, within the filter, okay? And let's make some changes. So I want to select all of the tones. I want just every intermediary tone that we can get. So we're going to leave those at 100% values, and let's just reduce all of our targeted colors to 0. And let's see what happens when we start to increase these sliders. So the very first one, obviously we know that we want to increase this slider here, okay? Like this one. So that's going to give us a bit of our target mask here, which changes now. So now we have a little bit of change in the hair for some reason, a little bit of change in around the dress edges. So does pixel targeting work with non-continuous areas, which Art asked? That's what we're going to be talking about, actually. We're going to be using a brush tool in addition to pixel targeting to sort of get to that. So stay put. Patricia asked, does it matter which you do first? No, it doesn't actually. This is this is what they call a parametric edit. So a parametric edit is an edit in which all of the tools are like aware of each other. So you can increase these values. It doesn't matter which one is increased first. Hopefully that answers your question. But in this case, we still don't have a very good selection of our dress. So let's figure out what's going on. Let's try to add some more purple. So it appears as though purple does very little, but it's still within the area of the dress here. So that's good. You'll notice that the mask changed just around the edge of our dress right here. So if I was to reduce that, you start to see those values go down. What we want to see again is we want to get this mask as bright white as possible around the area of this dress. Now blue, we're going to see some changes, right? Because a good part of this dress is predominantly blue. So as I increase that, those values are going to change. As I increase cyan, those values are also going to change. So that's great. Green, I don't anticipate there's going to be much green in this image, so nothing will change at all. So we'll just leave that at 0. Yellow, I imagine there will be no changes as well. So no matter how high or low this is, nothing occurs. Now, orange is interesting because when I increase this value, what actually we're targeting is the background entirely. It appears as though the background is the only aspect of this image that is orange, and it's orange right in here, right where this pink interacts with a little bit of an orangey yellow spectrum right here. So we actually want that at 0. We don't want that up at all. Now, what we might want is an increase of red. Ooh, Okay, so within that range, can we work with that? Let's see. Yeah, it's definitely red. Okay, so we have some, because this background is quite like salmon in color. It's in essence, it is using a lot of red in this shade, in this hue. So this background, this target mask, is impacted by that change. But notably, so is our dress. So the dress is white. That's ideal. We want our dress to be white because we know that that is going to be an area that's going to be impacted, is going to be changed in this process. But we want to make sure that we're not selecting any of the background. Okay. So the way that we do that is we add another selection method. In this case, we want to add a manual selection method. So with our pixel targeting active, okay, so with all of these values as is, with our 100% selection of blues and pinks and even a little bit of this red, let's refine this area, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up our third tool, okay? So we have this section, which is the universal controls of the colors, okay, right here. We have our targeted tones and our pixel targeting right here. And then we have the ability to brush on and to adjust colors based on their relative position in the image. Worth noting, okay, if we were to just change the hue without the brush active, we're going to see a huge change in this background. We don't want that. So as you can see, that's really jarring and ugly. We're going to avoid that, and we're going to avoid that by using the brush tool. So into my brush tool, I'm going to interact with these functions. So what we'd like to do here is we would like to make a selection of this area. And as you notice, the selected area becomes red. We're actually going to change that just to make it a bit easier to view on the screen. Let's just change it to a bright green. Yeah, that's perfect. So this green represents the area that we've made a selection of. We can turn this on or off using show brush strokes. So if I don't want to see this for whatever reason, I could just unclick that. All this is going to represent is our brush selection. Now I can like select my image here. I can do a really bad manual job of it, right? As you can see, a huge portion of my image, and I could go in with a much finer brush, blah, 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 and change this. But the problem is this isn't very accurate. It isn't very accurate for a number of reasons, but the primary reason being that in this case is that I'm never going to be able to do a great job of cleaning that area up. So what we want to do is we actually want to use something called smart brushing to be content aware of the areas of our image that we're changing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'm going to clear this entire brush selection by clicking the clear all brush strokes button up at the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn on smart brushing, which exists right underneath of it. It's just basically like a checkbox here. We can select based on color, we can select based on tone or brightness, or we can select based on a combination of both. And in this case, I'm going to use magic because I think it's the best. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to make the selection again, but you're going to notice that this selection is going to be much more refined because it's content aware. In essence, what I'm doing is I'm selecting a pixel, okay? In this case, the pixel is pink-ish, okay? And when I select that, what's happening is the pixel targeting tool is adding it to my selection and it's looking around that area, okay? Within the nib width, it's looking around that area for colors that are similar, obviously in terms of hue, but also in terms of brightness. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do my best job at selecting this whole image. There's going to be parts of this I'll have to clean up, and we'll illustrate how to do that in a second. But I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to make a really casual selection of this woman's dress. Now keep in mind, as I'm doing this, these pixel targeting functions are still active. So I'm still making sure that the area of the dress that is red, blue, pink, and purple are going to be the subjects of the effect, okay, or the subject of when I go to change these values. So what's really cool about this is I'm basically using these functions, these pixel targeting functions, to say, hey, these general colors, okay, within this region. And then I'm using the brush tool to say, okay, within this region, because I don't want a universal application of this, let's hone in. Let's hone in on these colors. Let's hone in on this area of our subject. So Jeff asked, hard brush or soft for selecting? You can reduce the pressure if you'd like, but you may notice that it's a little, or rather when you go to adjust these final values, that they might be a little less applied. So they might be a little bit more faded in that case. So I'm going to keep my pressure high. It's truly up to you. Again, the functions of like tolerance and pressure really come down to what the subject looks like. If we were dramatically to reduce our tolerance, okay, so let's say we set our tolerance to that of 3, what you're going to see if we zoom in here, what's happening, what's changing is it's being, show me the preview. Oh, there we go. If we're going to be that area, okay, with the very low tolerance set, it's saying like, hey, Adam, when you selected this pink, I'm looking for this pink and only this pink versus when you increase this tolerance dramatically. So if I increase this tolerance to say something like 98, when I go to make that selection, it's saying like, hey, Adam, when you select this pink, I'm also going to add a bunch of these other pinks to this selection. So the lower the tolerance, in this case, the more selective or discriminatory it is. And then when you increase the tolerance, the less discriminatory, the more it's capable of opening up that spectrum. Okay, so hard brush or soft brush depends on the context. And Peter asked, is there an eyedropper function which will let me sample the colors? I don't believe in this mode there is, but in general edit mode there is. But no, not for this one, unfortunately. And then Ulysses said, hi, Adam, smart brushing makes some granular selection. How can we avoid or reduce it? Well, actually, that's part of the tolerance aspect. If you increase your tolerance, you're going to find that you're going to get a less granular change when you go to adjust your final slider, okay? So that's one way. And then do have that pressure increased. And then the other thing that's worth of noting is that images that have, how do I put this? True blacks or like areas that don't fall under, like what you might need to do is go in with your smart brushing turned off as we're about to sort of just finalize and tweak those values. So I'll show you that in a moment. There's a couple ways you can do with that, but I would say play around with those 3 sliders, which is tolerance, pressure, and then also to make a encompassed selection with turning smart brushing off rather. So I'm going to take my image here. I'm just going to go around. Again, all I want to do is select as much of her dress as possible, because again, our pixel targeting tool is going to be doing a lot of the work for us momentarily here. So let's go in and grab that. Let's grab this. Let's get down here and grab the rest. And I'm just going to, when you're brushing, in general, so if you right click, that will undo this area. So as you can see, I just erased the overlap that occurred there. And then left clicking will apply the effect. So in this case, we'll brush the selection. So I'm just going to mix the two together to get the best selection here. And again, this doesn't need to be super intense. Like I'm sort of spending a bit of time on it, but you don't need to. Pixel targeting is going to help you do a lot of this work already. But I want it to be good, so I'm going to spend a good time making an accurate selection. And then lastly, let's turn it back to off. So I'm going to turn my magic off. And why I'm doing this is because I want to capture anything that would exist in the center. I'm not really worried about capturing the edge anymore. I just want to make sure that those areas are universally getting that change, that change is being applied. So this is more important with the interior detail of these roses. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to select those as I work, making sure that all of this area has some degree of that selection applied. And I think with that, I'm okay. I can spend a bit time cleaning up that one area, but that's fine for now. So with that smart brushing applied, now what we can do is I'm just going to hide the show brush strokes. And when we go to change the color, right, in here, with the hue, I mean, there's very few areas that I would need to repair with the brush. In this case, it would be right here, you know, and then a little bit on the edge right here to go in and with the smart brush. But in this case, what we've done is we very accurately ignored the background. the background being those targeted reds. We've done a great job of incrementally changing the background color in this woman's dress, or rather differentiating between the background in this woman's dress using these automatic functions, which are pixel targeting, and using the manual selection, which in this case says, hey, Adam, I want to select just the dress in this case with this manual selection. Stefan asked, are you using a mouse or stylus? That usually increases pressure. I'm using a mouse. You can use a stylus. In that case, I'm not sure. I don't personally interact with the stylus very much in these modes, but there would be a way to, in this case, increase the nib width and that sort of thing and have those applications be smooth. Yeah. Jeff asks, can you save the selection as a mask? So you can create a preset, remember? But the other thing, what you can do is pixel targeting isn't just a function that exists within this filter. Okay, so we'll illustrate that in a moment. Because this filter, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just gonna take a second to tea here, is only what we're changing right now is within this filter, which is the color balance filter. Okay, so when I click done, it's going to make a destructive change to this image. But pixel targeting exists within sort of edit mode in general. So let's illustrate that. Well, okay, for the most part, I think we've achieved what we wanted to do here. We can go through and we can adjust the hue of our subject's dress here. We can like dramatically reduce reds and greens. We can like really change and impact the way that this image looks within that selection. So selection achieved as far as I'm concerned. Let's cancel out and we'll talk about pixel targeting within a non-destructive sense. So pixel targeting exists within the select function. So if I go to select up at the very top here and I go pixel targeting, okay, what's going to do, it's going to bring up that same menu board that we mentioned earlier. And then again, we can save a preset from within this menu as well, but we can also save a mask. In this case, if we were to do the exact same adjustment, which is in this case, I want to increase that red, I want to increase the blues, yellows, pinks, cyans, that sort of thing. What I would have to do in this case is I would have to go through the process of using the brush tool, the brush selection tool, to functionally do what we just did there with the magic brush. So what we could do is we could do that, make that selection. And then what I would do is I would take this brush selection tool and I would just wipe away the areas that we actually don't want to select in our subject here. So this is very similar to what we're doing in the actual filter there. If we go to select up at the top, okay, and we go to overlay options, and instead of marching ants, we use selection highlighted, and we can change the color of selection highlighted once again to that like light green color. We can get a rendition of the areas that we would need to, in this case, wipe away from our selection. So we could go through and make a better selection based on that. And again, this would be a non-destructive change. One thing I would note as well is that this tool, the brush selection tool, which is right here, also comes with the function that is smart brushing. So remember when I mentioned earlier that like it was being content aware and changing the edges? Well, that also is the case within the brush selection tool right here. So if I was to say turn this off, I could go through and I could get rid of these sections, that sort of thing, get rid of this, and then I could come in and I could clean up this selection. So pixel targeting in this case is aiding in our selection process. It's making this process a lot easier for us. It's doing a lot of the hard work, the hard manual work early, and then what we can do is we can come in and we can just use the magic brush in this case to fix some of the areas of our image, like these sections right here. I don't want to be selecting this pink. I just want to be selecting the dress, go through and make those selections as we see fit. And then so when we want to change, get rid of the top here and there, and some of this in the background, just as much of that green as we can get rid of. when we go to change the hue slider, okay, that's an adjustment layer, very similar to what we did earlier. What we can do is this. Actually, my pressure is probably set too high for that area. I wonder if I can turn it down midway. No, that's okay. But in this case, I can go through and make that selection and go to vibrance. And when I click on vibrance, what's going to happen is it's going to create a mask for me right there. So I can take that mask, okay? I can take a selection. So if I was to click on my layer and say, what I can do is I can then copy that mask and apply it to different layers. So in this case, I have a vibrancy adjustment. But if I was to go, hey, I also want to make like a white balance change to this image, I can take that mask and then paste our selection that we created. If I want to adjust these values, or sorry, rather the values of this vibrance adjustment. Let's see here. Yeah, it can be applied to our subject in the same way. Only thing I'd mention is I used a slightly higher strength than that of our pixel targeting, so I'd need to go in and clean that up. Also, okay, when we have a mask, when a mask is active, we can go back and add that mask to our selection in the very same way we had earlier. So I can right click on my mask, I can say add mask to selection, okay? And then I can go up to select up at the top and actually save this selection so that I can use it again and again and again within this image. So if I wanted to save it as, say, dress selection, I can do so. And then even if that selection isn't active, I can go in and I can load that selection at any point right here. So Jeff, as a long form answer to your question, there's so many ways that you can take an active selection. You can copy it to utilize it differently. You can save the selection for use on that image. There's a lot of different ways that you can interact with that mask. So yeah. Yeah, so Maurice said, can you update that selection? Yeah, so if I had loaded that selection, okay, dress selection, I can go in and, remember my critique of it earlier was that, hey, I wanted to make sure that the rest of the center of this dress, had the same strength of that as our the one that we made the pixel targeting adjustment to. Well, I can go in and, obviously it's a terrible job because I'm speeding through this, but I can cleanly add that. And then I can go in and save that selection as a new selection in this case. I wonder if it'll allow me to update the same one. But anyway, so you can go in and save a new selection based on those credentials. So those can be updated. They're not necessarily, a static in this case. Okay, so we've talked about color balance. Okay, we've talked about using pixel targeting in addition to brush selections as a combination of manual, okay, and also automatic adjustments to color. We specifically chose to utilize the color balance, but you can also do the same sort of functions in color EQ, white balance, convert to black and white, split toning, and color LUTs. But again, all of these are filters. Let's change places now. Let's have a look at a different image, and let's make a LUT. We'll explain what LUTs are. Let's make a LUT. Let's utilize split toning to change color. Let's utilize photo effects to change color. And let's also save an action of us creating that so that we can apply that same selection or that same application to a different image. So I'm just going to change my image now. Let's get out of here. And let's go into this guy right here. Okay. Greg asked, why is there green still showing on our upper hip? Poor selections on my part. I can go in and fix that. Okay, change the face. Marshes. Okay. Yeah. So as Ted said, one of the things we talked about in the previous, we had about 2 workshops ago. We were just talking about the difference between vibrancy and saturation. When we were in that, when we were in color balance, you may have noticed that one of the functions was saturation and vibrance. What I might notice, or what I might recommend, is that when you're adjusting face, like colors within faces and that sort of thing, to utilize vibrance more than saturation, because vibrance is far less sensitive in terms of the orange spectrum of light. Orange is, no matter whether or not you're, ethnically black or ethnically white, is the color that like relates to skin tone. It's just that obviously with an increase or decrease of light in that. Versus saturation, saturation will change absolutely all colors within the image, oversaturate or undersaturate them, including orange. So if you're making changes to people's face, regardless of their actual skin tone, maybe utilizing something like vibrance to make those changes will actually be more useful than something like saturation. Yeah, +1 for eyedropper tool. Okay, duly noted. Actually, if you ever want something changed within the software, just email me. I send those messages directly to the developers. And based on whether or not people are really want a change, whether or not it's like higher on our priority list, gets changed. Also, if it's just a simple change like that, they often get added as like subsequent things to add in, like in the middle of the year, you know. So yeah, please just email me. I'll make sure that they know. Franz asked, probably have to leave soon. We'll be talking about coloring a black and white or sepia image. Franz, yes, but that's not in our workshop currently. I'm just talking about color adding and removing tools. The next workshop, okay, which is the 28th, that workshop is dedicated to specifically that function, which is colorizing black and white images. Okay, so stay tuned for that one. That will be in a couple weeks. Okay, let's talk about actions, LUTs, and split toning. Okay, so just a curiosity sake, how many people are familiar with actions in AC/DC? Just sound off in chat or in Q&A. I'm just curious. I want to know how many people are familiar with it, because I've talked about this in great deal, and I feel like it's one of our most underused tools. So no, and then familiar with actions in Photoshop. So no, slightly, not at all, no, nope, not really. Yes, use it every day. Awesome. Jillian, not me. No, never use. Okay, sweet. I'm so excited. So many of you have no idea. It's like one of our strongest tools in the software. Awesome. Okay. All right. Okay. No more need to chat. Just so I need to go through and clear about a bunch of these so I can see the questions. But that's great. Okay. So the majority is no, but there are a couple of yous that are familiar with it. That's so cool. I'm so excited for this. Okay. Okay. So actions are super simple. It's super simple. So when you're in edit mode, there's this. I'm gonna move it because it's kind of hard to see. There we go. This panel right here is our actions panel. All actions is a way to record your edits to an image. That's all it is. You can use those recordings on other images. This is really relevant for people who are doing the same adjustment to multiple images, okay? I've mentioned this in regards to wedding photography in the past. I mean, lots of people, if you're an intermediate to advanced photographer, you're probably selling your work, and in which case you're probably making a lot of similar changes to your images, especially if you're a wedding photographer. You might take a lot of beautiful photos, but the lighting quality in one case still needs to be adjusted, no matter what. So product photography, that's a great example, John. Yeah, super important product photography, because a lot of times your images have the same lighting conditions. So regardless of whether or not they're perfectly honed in terms of their contrast, there still might be some things that you need to change, whether it be color or removal of certain things, that sort of thing. So I'm going to open up this panel here, okay? This is actions. This is our actions browser. AC/DC comes with a bunch of pre-made ones. Forget about that, ignore that. It's not important for what we're talking about here. But the point is this is the area by which you can create like categories for where your actions live, okay? Let's make an action, okay? And all we need to do, we don't need to interact with the actions browser yet. Let's just turn this tool on, Okay, so up at the top, there's the record a new action, which is in the center here. I'm just going to click record. Okay, so record a new action brings up this box. Just literally tells us, it's a modal box that tells us what's being changed. Okay. Emma asked how to change two section color, like dress and skin in the same image. Oh yeah, well, you can make multiple selections in image. I probably won't touch on that, but we have touched on that in the past. It's something you can definitely do within develop mode and something you can do with edit mode as well in combination with layers. That's actually a really good topic. So multiple layer color adjustments. Okay, I'm going to do a tutorial on that because it's something that I don't think we'll have time to cover today, but I 100% will get to that. It's a good idea. Thank you for that, Emma. Okay, so we're recording an action. Let's make a change to this image. The first thing I want to do is we're going to utilize split toning. That's going to be the big one we're going to use in this image. And then we're going to make some color effects, and we'll make a LUT in here as well. So I'm recording. Let's go to split toning. But the first thing we want to do is we want to make another universal change to this image. We want to make a universal selection, an automatic selection, I guess is what I mean. So I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to select luminosity selection. Luminosity selection selects, in essence, the brighter parts of your image. That's all it does. But the cool thing is once you have a selection active, okay, with our selection active right now, you can see that that light green has been applied to our image, okay? That is our selection preview. If I go in and I inverse the selection, because as soon as I have a selection active, I can make changes to it. I can deselect it, I can inverse it. I can also make, pixel targeting changes to this image. I can save the selection, etc. But all I want to do is I want to inverse it. So when I inverse it, you can see that the darker parts of the foreground, okay, are the subject of my selection, and they vary in terms of intensity. So our subject being the person standing in the foreground, he's actually the most green, and the reason why is because his subject has some darker colors in him. Either has like tonally he has blacks and shadows more than the rest of our image. Versus our sky, which is not really selected at all, with the exception of the little bit in here. And you'll notice that the pressure or strength in this case being applied is very slight. So it's very, very, very light, with the exception of sort of these areas that have a higher pressure. When people were talking earlier about how soft to make applications, well, this one you don't have a choice, really. In this case, when we make a luminosity selection, it's just being applied in the smartest way that the program knows how. Okay, but this looks really silly. You're thinking, Adam, well, I'm just looking at a green image. Great. And I agree that's terrible. So let's take this selection. Okay, we have an active selection. All right, and I'm going to click on split toning right down here in the adjustment layer panel. These are all non-destructive tools. I'm clicking on split toning. Okay, so if we look to our layer mask, now you remember earlier when we were in color balance, there was a little box that showed a preview, like a preview mask of our subject. We were referencing that when we were increasing the pixel targeting sliders. The theory is the same here. So this is a mask, okay? And masks have a bunch of different functions we've talked about in other workshops. But in this case, we have a mask and it's displaying two things. It's displaying a sky that is sort of more black in the mask or darker grays, and the foreground, which represents sort of lighter grays and whites. And what that means in regards to masks is very simple. Black means off and white means on. So when we go and we change the actual values of this tool, they're going to be applied to the area that is on. I'll go back to that. So when you click on the mask itself, the mask tool comes up with feathering, show opacity, invert the mask, that sort of thing. when I click on the tool itself, the split tone functions come up and we can adjust them from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's crank the saturation and the hue here. So I'm going to, let's just go 100 for both of these. And let's pick a highlight and a shadow. So if we go in and we change the highlight to say this blue and the shadow to, like, what do I want? Maybe I want to change the shadows and not the, yeah, there we go. So we just want something really kind of dramatic looking. Let's go in and change it to like a purple, and I'm gonna decrease those values slightly. Yeah, there we go. So what am I doing? So I have 4 sliders, or 5 rather, in split tone. So what we're telling split tone to do is we're saying, okay, for the highlights, we want you to fill them with orange, like this orange color. And where we're seeing that most notably is in the peaks here in our foreground here, our midground here. And then what we're doing with our shadows is we're changing them to this sort of blue-ish color here. So it's in essence, it's changing the color. It's adding colors to those sections to dramatically change our image. So this is our original image. This is our adjustments. What I want to do is I actually want to make sure that we maintain our sky's original color entirely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the topmost portion of our image. I'm going to grab a black brush, okay? You were curious earlier about the color picker. The eyedropper tool's right there. It's also within the color tool as well. Oops, there we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over this section, and I'm going to return it essentially back to the original values. As you can see, when we paint black over this top section here, that's illustrated within the mask. So the bottom section, it has the split toning application applied, and the black bar here up at the top, none of that area is changing whatsoever. So that area is again, you know, is essentially its original values. And when we go to preview or show saved here, you can see that that is in fact the case, that it's just our foreground that is changing in color. Okay, these are pretty dramatic changes. Just bear with me. Okay, so currently we just made a split tone change. We've made some brush changes to it. We've made a selection. So if we're looking at a recorded action, we can see that it's recording exactly how we've changed our image. We've made a selection. We've added split tone. We've adjusted split tone. We've made 3 brush changes. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we want to, let's just make a photo effect change on our image. So I'm just going to add photo effect, which is another adjustment layer. And let's pick something kind of dramatic. Let's go through, maybe I want Sophia, who knows? The change in this case doesn't really matter. Yeah, let's stick with Sophia and let's dramatically reduce the opacity. And we'll fill in a blend mode as well. So I have photo effect selected. I'm going to reduce the opacity just so it's not so egregious on our image here. And then I'm going to maybe suggest that it's a soft light instead of a normal application. So I can then hide or show that layer right there. So when we go look at our recorded history once again, you can see that that blend mode has been applied. And then apparently hide layer has been added to that list there too. Okay, and what else do we want to do here? Maybe what we also want to do is save a LUT in the process. So we're still recording an action. Actually, maybe let's stop recording and then we'll save a LUT, just so we don't confuse people here. So this is all what we wanted to do. All we wanted to do was make a couple of quick changes to this image. We wanted to do a split tone effect and a photo effect, illustrating a couple things. We're illustrating the luminosity selection. We're illustrating these adjustment layers and quick and fast ways to change color on an image. Oh, sure. I'll explain LUT really quickly as we get into it. In fact, actually, I'll explain it just in a moment, but let's save this recorded action first. So I'm going to click the stop recording, okay, right here. And this is going to give me the ability to save this recording, okay, this recording of these changes. Let's just name this action. We're going to go luminosity. Oh my God, do I have to spell luminosity plus, or rather luminosity, and we'll go split toning. Okay, and then we're going to save it in, let's save it into a category. So earlier, when we had the action browser open, I was showing you sort of the sort of preset categories that we've created. I believe there probably is one that's just uncategorized, which we'll save it in, which I think exists by default, okay? And then we'll click save. So it's going to take a moment to save this, this sort of action that we've created. Franz asked, still here, would be great to learn a bit more about the various blend modes. I've experimented with them, never quite sure what they actually do. That's actually great. I mean, I use them a ton in graphic design, and I don't really know what they do either. Like, I understand how they're changing their image. You can tell, like, if you use multiply, your image becomes darker. But that's a great subject for a workshop. So I'm just going to write that down, workshop on blend modes. And they do things. They're really interesting. Like, I was about a year ago, I was reading up about like what screen actually is, screen blend mode. So yes, we'll talk about that. Future workshop for sure. So our action is saved. If we go to our toggle actions browser, okay, and we go under uncategorized, we can see that luminosity split toning, the one we just created, is listed here, okay? Actually, interestingly enough, we can play this, this action on the same image again. So what it'll do if I click play, it'll probably just repeat these effects on our image. So as you can see, photo effect and split toning have been doubled over this image, okay? What we'll do is, actually this is great. We're gonna go back to a different image, okay? +1 for blend modes, +1 for blend mode tutorial, awesome. Thank you, I will definitely do that. It is on my list. I'm gonna discard these changes. Let's go to a different image. Let's go to mountains, for example. I'm going to illustrate how to run this action both on this image within manage mode, but also within edit mode. So remember remember John said earlier, I believe, product photography. Okay, so you have, this is just obviously we only have 5 images in this folder, but let's just say we have 100 images within this folder, okay? What I could do is I could select all those images, or I could like control select the images that I want to change. In this case, we're just going to take these 2. Okay, we're going to go to actions. We're going to pick that same category, uncategorized, and we're going to go to luminosity split toning, and we're going to play that action on these images. So it's going to run through that, and it's going to change those images based on that criteria. Let's have a look at some of these. I'm actually curious how they came out because we made a luminosity selection at the very beginning. So if we go into this image, I mean, obviously it looks dreadful because in this case it wasn't intended for it. But the point is that application that has been applied to this image. The same in this case is true for mountains. One other thing to note too is I believe we created in this process, we flattened our image. So if we select these 2 images again and go to uncategorized and go to luminosity split toning, go to options, what we could do is, oh yeah, it's JPEG. We just want an ACDC file format. Awesome, this is so cool. Okay, so if we wanted to be able to edit those values, okay, so we want to, when we go to create or play this adjustment, if we wanted to play this luminosity split toning on our image, okay, we have a bunch of options here. Let's show you how do we get to that again. So actions, uncategorized, luminosity split toning, and then options just underneath play. What I can do is I can say, okay, well, I want to rename the modified images and place them in the same folder. I could also overwrite them, but we don't generally want to do that. Or we could place them in a whole new folder. And then underneath that, our file output options indicate that we can choose JPEG, okay, or we can actually choose ACDC file format. So ACDC file format is the file format that can that includes those edits, those adjustments. Okay, they're the non-destructive file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it from JPEG, which is a compressed, non-editable file, to ACDC file format, which is a uncompressed, editable file, and hit OK. And then this time, when I go to play uncategorized luminosity split toning on our image, instead of creating a JPEG like it has here, what we're actually going to do is we're going to create 2 new files within the same folder, and they'll both be ACDC files. And my guess is that they will contain those edits that we can adjust. So if we go into Misty 0, the ACDC file here, I believe our changes should be just listed on the right. Yeah, awesome. So there are our two adjustments. So if we wanted to, we can save these and then utilize them at any point. A person asked earlier, hey, Adam, I want to make a selection, okay, of our subject, the woman in the dress from earlier. Well, I can make that selection within actions and then run it on a whole bunch of images. I mean, provided in this case that the images are similar and you'd want to run that that change on them. But the point is you can do that within actions. Okay, that was a bit of a deviation, but we've illustrated to you how you run that application. We run that that action on our images. One more thing before we go on to LUTs. We just opened up our original image here. Again, in edit mode this time, not in manage mode. I can click on toggle actions browser, and we can run our luminosity split toning on our image, our original image, okay? And that will add those 2 layers to our image. So that's how we could run that same action on our image within edit mode. Okay, answer a couple questions, then we're going to move on to LUTs. Fran said, I will have to catch the rest on YouTube. Great as always. Thank you for hanging out, friends. It will be on YouTube as soon as I can put it on there. Gary asked, I've scanned hundreds of old photos that are bland sepia color. I've been manually converting each pics to black and white and then applying auto levels. The outcome has been generally very pleasing. Can this be done with fewer steps via action? Yeah, I would do it in edit mode like I've described. If the change is to apply a sepia, right? You're saying that are bland sepia color, and then you've been changing them to black and white. Okay, so let's do that. So we have your layer. I want to change it to black and white, and I can adjust the values in here, recording this all along, and then run a curves adjustment or a levels adjustment, which would be similar to auto levels in this case, and then save that, and you can run it on all of your hundreds of photos. So we've done 2 things. We've converted the image to black and white, and then we've run a levels adjustment where I take the midtones and I adjust them or something like that. Save that, boom. So yeah, absolutely. Please do that. In fact, actually, that's going to save you hours. Yes, actions can be used to place watermarks as well. Absolutely. Gary, awesome. Glad of it. Okay, let's move on to LUTs. I'm going to delete these 2 layers, and so I have these 2 adjustments applied to my image, okay? Photo effect and split toning. What are LUTs? Okay, so let's take a step back and talk about film. So in the early years of film production, okay, cameras, video cameras, would use film, and film was mass produced by a bunch of different companies. And with film, these different companies had different production methods that would functionally change the color and the appearance of the end product of the movie when the film was recorded. And this was purely due to convention, purely due to not economic, but environmental circumstances when the film that was being used in these film cameras was produced. So film looked different, okay? Oftentimes, movie producers, when they wanted a certain effect or appearance of their movie, they would utilize certain films because they knew that certain films had inherent qualities to them. When film became digitized over the period of, like in this case, the 80s and 90s, when that process of digitization was taking place, a film, the actual object that is film, was being used less. And through the process of digitization, there was a homogenization that occurred with the appearance of movies, because they didn't have that je ne sais quoi, that sort of quality that original film had. Okay, enter LUT. LUT stands for look up table. And so what a lookup table does is it's a digital way to replicate the inherent hiss, cracks, coloration differences of original film. Now, lookup tables are basically a filter on an image. When you're looking at video production, they're more for like giving a different, they're more for discoloring or changing the color of certain of movies. And there's hundreds of different lookup tables for video production. Now, we're not talking about video production. We're actually talking about changing static images, photography. The same thing can be applied. You can go on the internet and you can look up LUTs, like free LUTs on the internet, and you can download those LUTs and apply those effects to your images. And what those effects are trying to do is to create circumstances or a visual application that would change your image, right? It's just going to, if maybe the lookup table is simple as blue, and so what it does is when you apply it to your image, it makes your image look more blue. But you can create LUTs in AC/DC, okay? So that's what we're getting to. So the history of LUTs is that we're trying to replicate old film effect. And the way that we're doing that is by creating a filter that we put over top of your image. Okay, so let's do that. What we can do is actually in AC/DC, the LUT, that you can apply a LUT by clicking on the bottom right-hand corner here. It says color LUTs. And then provided you have one downloaded and on your computer, you can run them on your image. I believe a LUT is, oops, let me see, where's the import screen? Probably ran away from me. There we go. The LUTs that AC/DC can support are 3DL and cube files, which are listed right here. So when you're downloading them off of the internet and you're on like photographyluts.com, the file type would have to be .cube or .3DL. But this is more nerdy stuff than anything. It isn't really necessary. If we want to create a LUT, what we can do is, all that AC/DC cares about is that you have effects or adjustments over top of your image, these adjustment layers, okay? So we have split toning with these values. We have photo effect with this value and this opacity. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna navigate to, I believe, is it layer? No, sorry, it's under tools. And I'm gonna go to create LUT. So what I can do is, again, we're saving these two values, a photo effect and split toning. We're not saving the layer. LUT does not save the actual base layer. So we're going to describe this LUT. It's going to go, gosh, what is this? I don't know, space appearance, I guess. Looks very spacey. And then I don't need copyright. I'm not going to worry about that. And we'll save it as a cube file. And for the purpose of this video, we're just going to save it at a medium quality just so this doesn't take forever. But you can save it at very high quality. And I'll hit save. And then we're going to save this as space, okay? And I will save it within our LUT folder here. Click save. And then what this enables us to do is go to a different image. So we could go to our woman image here. We can click on our LUT function, and we can then run space on this image, which will change the appearance of our image entirely. Also, interestingly enough, this is actually something you can do within develop mode as well. This is a way that you can sort of link the interaction between adjustment layers and develop mode. With those of you that are very familiar with AC/DC will know that develop mode and edit mode, they're sort of four separate functions. Develop mode is intended for editing raw images, and edit mode is more used for editing, or rather combining and using layers to edit your image. So they sort of have different functions, but one of the beautiful things about this is I can go into an image into develop mode. So we'll take our dress image and go into develop mode instead of edit mode. And then what you may notice is that color LUTs is something that we can apply to our image here. Let's turn off the clipped shadows and highlights. And then I can take something like space and apply it to our image. So this enables you to, in essence, get the effect of multiple adjustment layers in edit mode into your develop mode suite, if that makes sense at all. So you can both produce, in this case, an action that you can save on multiple images at the same time, but you can actually also produce a lookup table, and save it as a 3DL or a cube file, and then use it in develop mode for similar reasons. In this case, totally interacting with a raw file versus interacting with a file that you're going to be compressing into a JPEG. How is LUT different to a preset? It just adds another category in this case in develop mode that can be functionally saved as a preset. So when I go up to the adjustment settings and go save preset, I believe color LUTs is another category within this section. How is it visually different than other effects? I mean, that's truly up to you. I guess the difference between a LUT and something like a photo filter is that photo filters are static and don't change. They're always there in the product. They're pre-created in the software. A LUT is a filter, in essence, that you create yourself using varied adjustment layers. Willem, thank you for participating. John, have to go, thank you. We covered that. Do Photoshop or use the form? I don't know whether or not Photoshop and Lightroom use LUTs. They're fairly common, so probably, but I actually don't know the answer to that. Alexander, maybe contact me via email. I'll get support to help you out. Thank you. Okay. So actions and batch are different. I can thank you so much for participating. That is, we're getting to the end of our workshop now, but I just want to stick around to answer questions and things like that. But yeah, we are, that's what I wanted to cover for today. We covered, color balance, split toning LUTs, photo effects, how to make manual and automatic selections to images, and I talked a little bit about actions as well. Thank you, Witzel. Bye-bye. Thank you, Maurice. Yeah, again, this will be up. This will be available on our YouTube page in a couple days. Our YouTube page, once again, is, oops, I'll copy and paste so you guys can see it. Oh my God, there's so many questions. But I'm hopefully the conversation at the very least about actions is useful to some of you, because I know that so many people aren't familiar with that functionality. And given that how many people said no, they've never used it in this workshop, I'm really excited for you because it's going to be awesome. It's going to really change your workflow. Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. Oh, just a reminder before, as people are leaving, use that coupon code if you want Alex's WAMC course. Just follow the link I've provided. The coupon code gives you $5 off. If you want to take a course, essentially, that he's provided on DSLR workflow, follow that. It's awesome. I mean, everything Alec produces is really good. So thank you, Dave from St. Louis. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Tom. Awesome. Okay, so Phil asked, a competitive product, Capture One, has ICC profiles to change the digital profile for colorization, etc. Are LUTs similar to the intent? That's actually more of a dev question than it would be. I'm not familiar with ICC profiles, but I can get the answer for you if you email me, because our developers are just a click away from me. So if you send me an email, I'll find out more for you. It's also possible that ICC profiles are, I mean, that's something too that we might already have a separate functionality in ACDC for it. I might just not be familiar with it. So Phil, please email me. My email address is in oops, I will put all panelists and attendees and click it in there. Sorry, I just added it to the chat. Follow me, it's aprice@acdsystems.com. Hi, Simon from Victoria, BC. Nice. Me too, obviously. Good to hear from you. Thank you and take care. Cecilia, thank you. Martin, thank you. Stephen, thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Julio. That's awesome. Dawn, thank you. Roy, thank you. Thank you, Sydney from Sydney. Okay. Louise, awesome. Yeah. So, and then again, just a reminder: the next tutorial, the next workshop rather, is going to be on. It's going to be covering how to colorize a black and white image, which I first need to do a bunch of research on, but I'm excited to talk about. And then my notes here are that we're going to be talking about. We'll do a tutorial on multiple layer color adjustments, and we will do a workshop on blend modes as well. So those are some good ideas from users. Thank you, Robert. Sam, thank you. My wife and I are practicing photography in Vancouver. Awesome. Very happy to find an easy to use photo editing program. I'm glad of it. Yeah, I mean, ACDC is a Canadian company, pardon me, or small to medium sized company. We've been around for 25 years. I mean, yeah, it's we've actually been around the same amount of time that Adobe has. But our software has always been more in regards to management functionality and digital asset management, and in many ways is sort of still dwarfed by some other companies. But we're trying to get it out there, and we're trying to make more and more content. As you can see, like we've been doing bi-weekly workshops for like ever since COVID started, and I really like getting the content out there because these people really have a tendency to really like these workshops. So yeah, thank you from Vancouver. Robert, thank you. Joe, thank you. Les, thank you. Yahir asked the other classes when. It is going to be this month on, I believe, the 28th. So 2 weeks from now, I will be covering colorizing black and white images, which is an extension to a previous workshop that we did on restoring a black and white image. Okay, so you hear that's in 2 weeks on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Patricia, we've covered raw files in another workshop. Please visit our YouTube channel and check out Development Series 1 and 2, which we cover that extensively. YouTube.com/ACDC Photo Studio, hit playlists and go to develop. Peter, thank you. Andre, thank you. Yes, I'm using the 2020 version. I always use the most updated version. This is Ultimate 2020. Oh, awesome, Sam. I appreciate being called an expert. I don't feel like one, but I do appreciate that. That's awesome. Wayne, thank you. Bye. Edward, thank you. Emma, sorry, awesome. Greetings from Australia. Thank you, Peter. Sam, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Alan from Sweden. You can, I guess in regards to using raw files, I can use a raw file in edit mode, but because edit mode needs to compress your image in order to make editing changes, it's going to take like the highest quality raw file that you produce, you click to edit, and then it's going to compress it into a JPEG based on that. It's develop mode where you can parametrically edit a raw file, and how that development occurs is, as you may know, raw files can't be actually edited. They're a non-editable file. So what programs like ACDC have to do is they have to create a sidecar file, and the sidecar file contains the changes to the photo. So when you say, hey, I want to change the light EQ, or I want to change the color tone in our image, it's not saving the raw file. It's actually saving a sidecar file that links to the original file, if that makes sense at all. But yeah, so obviously we cover that in the development workshop. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Barbara. I'm glad. We covered a lot of cool things in this. Ian, my email address once again is aprice@acdsystems.com. You can find it in the chat. Got to run. Awesome. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Thanks. I will have the recording up in probably 2 days. It just takes a long time to render them because obviously, this one was an hour long. So thank you, Marcia. Tony, enjoy the presentation. I have a few questions not related to today's presentation. I should email you. Please do. One very short one, if you know the answer right off. Is there a way to limit the number of images that can be stacked in photo stacking? I tried it with 30 plus and it would not work. 20 plus would work. I don't know how many photos are the maximum, but I know that there is a maximum. Please email me and I find out with our development team. But I think you're getting to the bottom of it already, it sounds like. But photo stacking, I'm not sure. I'd have to double check with our dev. Carlos, thank you. Wayne, very interesting colorizing tutorial. I've been scanning old black and white photos and improving quality, removing yellowing, but have not tried colorizing. Yeah, neither have I. That's what we're gonna learn for 2 weeks from now. Excited for it. I'm relatively new to ACDC and kind of old school. Is there any kind of written manual available? If you go to help within the product and go to help contents, there's a bunch of content in there. There's also a user guide, which is somewhere in here as well. ACDC 365 help. Oops, no, that's not what I meant. Not. But I would. Oh, quick start guide. That's it. So there is some stuff within the product that will direct you and answer your questions. Whenever I have questions about stuff, I just go to help contents and I'll do a search for a query, and it'll often bring something up. So if I wanted to look up light EQ, for example, there's every time that light EQ is mentioned is in these sort of topics. So yeah, there is help. Yeah, it's changed a lot since ACDC Pro 5. I mean, when I started, we were in ACDC Ultimate 8 had just released. So the first instance of Ultimate, just after they split it off from Pro when they added a layered editor. So I've been using it for a while too, but you've been using it for a lot longer than I have. So yes, written available. Yeah, for sure. Kevin, thank you. John, thank you. Steve asked, really useful tutorial again, Adam. I like to follow your presentations with ACDC open and follow your steps. Oh, that's cool. Glad of it. Yeah, I mean, that's a really cool way to do it. I mean, I think they're intended to sort of be watched, you know, but when people say that they also can follow along during, that's awesome. I don't think this will save the chat, Patricia, I'm sorry. Ian, thank you. Can you make the taskbar buttons larger while you're working in your photo? I'm working on a 4K screen, so oftentimes it shows up a bit small for some of our users. I'll have to look into that. I'm not sure if it's possible. Thank you, John. Thank you, Franz. Thank you, greetings from Rome. Thank you, Julio. Patricia. Thank you, Peter. Cool. Okay, so that's most of people's questions for today. So I'll probably sign off. But as like I said, please email me if you have any more questions. Oh, awesome! Thank you, Alexander. I appreciate that you did that. Ditto on button size. I'll look into it, Joan. Thank you. Jeanette said, thanks, Adam. Cool stuff as always. Always agree with the previous person. Yeah, there might be a discrepancy too, because it depends on what resolution screen you're using as in addition to the one I'm using. I'm assuming that most of our users are using 1080p screen sizes, but some people might be using smaller. And if you are using smaller than the 1080p, you're going to have some serious changes in terms of the way the UI looks. But yeah, I am using a 4K screen, so it's going to be quite a bit bigger, and as such will probably appear smaller to you, but I'll look into it. Yeah, so Peter, when you purchase the software, if you purchase on our German site, you'll be receiving a German product. If you purchase on our English site, you'll be receiving an English product. But I think, and I could be wrong, when you go to purchase the product, I think you can change the language within the purchasing structure. Let me just double check this. I know that for sure if you change the region, it'll change the product. But if we go to Ultimate and try to purchase it, so buy now, and we go to, is there a way to change, so you can change the currency. It says English here. Okay, so it appears that we can't change the language here, But if I was to go, hey, I want a German version, so I go to the German site, okay, and I go to buy the product on the German site, I believe when you buy it, okay, it'll say DE or German, Dutch, right here. So all you want to look for is when you go to purchase the product, that the language listed on the product page lines up with the language that you want. But I would do so by navigating to the German product. In terms of AC/DC, the two hard translations that are always like supported every year are German and French. Italian and Spanish are often take a couple more years for us to do them, just because those are smaller markets. But German and French are like a couple months always behind our English release. So yeah, so that is, if you want to change the language version, it has to be purchased in that function, because you can't just change the language in the software. That doesn't work. It has to be in the correct corresponding language. Okay, that's it for me today, guys. I appreciate everybody sticking by. Like I said, if you have a question, please email me. Please visit our website, or rather our YouTube channel, if you want to watch this workshop in a couple days. And as always, if you're a big fan of Alec Watson, just be sure to check out his WAMC DSLR tutorial. And note that if you use the coupon code that I posted earlier, it is $5 off for you workshop attendees. Yeah. All right. I'm taking off for today. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day it is for you today now. Take care.